there's been multiple traumas inflicted at the same time, which means that you quite possibly will never heal in the same sense that you're expecting to heal because you're changed and your whole life has changed. And my husband always says you need to feel it to heal it. So one thing that I really needed to let myself feel was the death of a dream.
Hey, I'm Madison Bertunas.
And I'm Jessica Leap-Fick.
Here's to Speak is really about loving the people who are around you and learning that faith and spirituality can be a normal part of your conversation with them.
We realize that talking about Jesus and faith can feel really awkward and uncomfortable, but we believe each of us can listen, learn, and love people better. Today, we are talking with Emma Reynolds. And Emma, we are so glad to have you on our podcast today. So we'd love for you to just share a little bit about where you live, how you spend your time, what are things you're interested in, just to let our listeners get to know you a little bit.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored that you would even want to talk to me today.
Yes.
I live in Cocoa Beach, Florida, which on the peninsula is right in the middle and on the East Coast up against the Atlantic. I live here with my husband, who is a surfer and a pastor.
Fun. Pastor/surfer.
Right, because those things go together, I guess. And we have 4 children in our beautiful blended family. 2 of those children live with us. They are 6 and 8, which means that I don't have any hobbies. I am a mom.
Your hobbies are making lunches, driving kids to school, and nagging them to pick up their toys. Like, it's crazy. I have the same hobbies.
Yeah, in my spare time, I like to manage their electronic screen time and go to soccer games. So I try to be really involved with the kids' school and life. So I can't even believe I'm saying this. I am also the PTO vice president at their school. So I've sort of like been doing the mom thing 24/7, which is fantastic for this season. But before this season, I was a sailing instructor and a swimmer and a lifeguard and a singer. And I garden. I still garden. I still sneak out and garden sometimes, but it's really hot in Florida. So
Yes,
many times my gardens are not quite as fruitful as I'd hoped.
Yeah.
Well, Emma is also a coworker of ours. Emma is a divisional field director for Stonecroft in the southern region. And so we've had the pleasure of working with you and getting to know you. And we wanted to ask you on the podcast today because we are doing a series called Her Story Matters. And we've heard your story, and even if we hadn't heard it, it would still matter. And really in this series, we wanted to interview ordinary, everyday women who have extraordinary stories, who have been through some stuff, but can look back and see the redemption that God has brought. So, Emma, let's start out by just pointing out a turning point in your life where you were thinking to yourself, how did I get here?
Gosh, I think there are several turning points in my life. I can see over the years, like after struggling with certain things that I think many women have probably at least touched on, things like depression or loneliness, or there was a bout of infertility. There were like times in my life that really sort of changed and refined me. But I think that the part that really stands out for me, where I felt like the most powerful turning point, was probably my time as a single mother, because I had gone through a very abrupt and traumatic end to my first marriage to my college sweetheart. And I obviously didn't know that I was going to be thrown into a new chapter until I was already there, because of the gory details of the end of that marriage. Like, I had some real significant problems trusting not just men, but women. Mm-hmm. If you can't trust men or women, you're really only left with children and God. But, I spent a lot of time with my kids, and I spent a lot of time getting to know myself again, and in desperation, clinging to my faith, because I didn't really feel like there was anything else to do. It didn't feel like I had a ton of options. So I drew near to God and in that time, like I felt my resolve grow stronger, not weaker, like this against what would seem, to be the natural progression of I'm getting tired of being a single mom and I'm lonely and I'm, no one understands this. I have a newborn and a 2-year-old and we're all alone. Like there were these like horrible, sad circumstances and I can't really explain it, but inside of me grew like a steel resolve.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what your life was like leading up to kind of the defining moment of becoming a single mom. Like what was kind of life and faith like for you?
Yeah, I love that question so much because I have experienced a plethora of different life experiences. Like I feel like if I wrote a book, it would have 57 chapters because none of them have been alike. I was raised Catholic and christened into Catholicism, which I thought was awesome. And I loved a lot of those traditions and the richness of Catholicism. But we moved and started attending a Lutheran church. And then we went to, which was great, and then a Methodist church, which was great, actually, where I met Jesus. I was in a non-denominational church in college and then a Baptist church right out of college. That was also fantastic and passionate. And then back to Methodist. So I feel like my faith journey has been sort of ziggy-zaggy, kind of windy. And I love it that way because it really gave me sort of a taste of like all the best things about each of these places and these faith families. My mom was a single mom. And so I think it's pretty amazing that she juggled 3 jobs and she was young. So like when other 20-somethings were like out partying, my mom was sitting on our apartment floor with me having a princess tea party.
Yeah.
Because she was fantastic. And so I think it's amazing that even in that time when she was broke and tired and young and single, raising me, I think it's amazing that she still managed to like take me to church and say our prayers. And
yeah, that's a pretty encouraging example to just grow up and see a mom who has a faith like that and a commitment to her daughter in a lot of hard things.
Yeah. So knowing you now, Emma, you are just in a totally different place than you were. I'm thinking about, wow, your mom was a single mom and then you became a single mom. That wasn't in the plan. Just take us back to what it was like on a day-to-day basis to be a single mom and what you went through.
yeah, that's so true. It's now, I have this beautiful life with a man who loves me very much. We literally live in a vacation spot. I'm steps away from the ocean and we have 2 beautiful kids living with us in a white picket fence and everything that we could ever want. And no one guesses that like 6 years ago, like I was laying on a cold tile floor next to my dog's crate, just like wishing maybe to not even wake up from this.
Yeah.
I mean, the end of that marriage was so sudden and it was also very public. And so I really sort of pushed everyone away from me and just sort of like buried my head into my job at the time and my children. But only in hindsight can I see that a steel resolve was growing inside of me.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about it on a day-to-day basis, I was broke and I was desperate. I wasn't receiving any help. I didn't have any family in town. I had a few loyal, faithful, truth-speaking friends in my life who sort of told me, like, get back up.
Yeah. And it sounds like it wasn't something that was like, oh, we'd been having problems for a long time. It'd been kind of moving towards divorce. Like, what was that experience like for you to kind of realize this whole thing I've been living is coming to an end? Like, how did all that transpire?
I know that every woman's like story is really different. And so I try not to scare women when I say this, but we were not fighting like the end of that first marriage. Like we had just had a baby like 2 months before that. And we were very happy.
Yeah.
I thought we were very happy. We had been together for a long time. And there were normal like marriage bumps, but I didn't know that we were unhappy.
Yeah.
He was in a dark place. And as a result, he made some selfish decisions and there was a string of infidelities. And a few of them were my friends. And I didn't know about any of it until it came to a screeching halt when he left the family computer open and he had a secret stash of things. And I recognized a lot of it, a lot of the girls. And the last one was like one of my closest friends at the time who was also a leader in our church,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it was like one of my buddies in my small group.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that group fell apart. It was a time of crisis and heartbreak for everyone. It wasn't just me.
Because this was all happening in your church, because it was you
Yes.
and your church friends. And yeah.
Wow.
I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have anyone. And so I had to rely on a couple of those people in the small group.
Yeah.
Possibly the reason I walked out of that,
Mhm.
season, other than God,
Yeah.
was probably this other woman. And so it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
It was, I didn't know, like, what do I do? Not go to church? Should I move away? I had a great job, but didn't pay very well, and I couldn't pay our bills.
That's a lot of loss happening all together, of not just your marriage, but also your friendship, with someone who you loved and trusted, your church community that had been a safe place for you, financially, a loss of not having a husband to help provide for income.
And just the day-to-day life, just completely gone and different forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. I actually, like, in therapy, like a year later, I was talking to the therapist, and she said, I don't know why this was so, like, monumental for me at the time, but she's like, there's been multiple traumas inflicted at the same time, which means that you quite possibly will never heal in the same sense that you're expecting to heal, because you're changed and your whole life has changed. And one thing she said that I needed to fully grieve, my husband always says you need to feel it to heal it. So one thing that I really needed to let myself feel was the death of a dream.
Yeah.
I had done everything right. I went to college and I met a great guy who's a Christian, and we built a beautiful life together, and I had a great job. I never missed work, and I was a good mom, and I took care of my kids, and still everything fell apart and I couldn't do anything about it. And as a control freak, that was not cool.
Yeah.
Like, that was not cool.
Yeah.
I pictured myself on a rocking chair on the front porch, old,
Don't
like,
we all?
yelling at the neighborhood kids, like, I had to grieve the death of a dream.
Grieve the death of a dream. I think that is such a good word. So for our listeners today who feel like you need to let something go that's been done to you, or in order to heal and move on, just grieve the death of your dream. Like, that is really powerful. So as you've been talking, Emma, I've been thinking about what all of this had probably done to your identity. So, you've talked about these huge changes that took place abruptly. So with that comes, I think of myself as this way. I'm in this dream. I think of myself this way. Boom, this happened. So then what did you think about yourself after that?
Or as you were going through it?
Right. Oh my gosh. It was so shocking, because, like, I don't want to brag, but, like, in college, like, I was president of the student body. Like, I was a cheerleader when I was a teenager. Like, I had all of these things together.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I, even at church, like, I was super involved.
So it sounds like you're kind of like good Christian girl, all American girl.
But, like, using, like, if you look at what had to happen after that, is, like, I mean, any ego or pride that I may have had was slaughtered like a lamb right in front of me. Because now everywhere I go, I'm holding a tiny baby infant with no wedding band on. I'm getting interesting looks. It was just sort of like, if I thought I was at the top before, certainly I couldn't even see the top from here. I was in poverty. I lost our family vehicle. I defaulted on all of our loans. Everything was in my name, because before the marriage, I had great credit, and he didn't. My credit, everything was in my name. So it was a disaster. Now I was labeled as all of these things that I worked really hard in my life to, avoid. And there's nothing I could do about it.
Yeah.
Like, I had to give up. Like, the day that they took our car, I had to choose. Like, I can just give it up, or I can just not get groceries this week. And that's not an option. I have two small children, So, and socially too, like, we were kind of the strongest, I guess, like, group of friends with the tightest bond.
Wow.
And I felt really comfortable with them. And so now I had lost all of them as well. A lot of my college friends, they were in an uncomfortable position where they had to sort of choose a side or get out completely. And so I tried to make that decision very easy for people because I was so hurt and damaged that I just made it easy and like went down the list, unfriended everybody, pushed everyone out of my life if they knew both of us. Because I didn't know, like, are they co-conspirators to this?
I'm sure it just shakes your foundation of trust to think like this woman who is my best friend was doing horrible things behind my back that I had no idea about. So I could see how that would just shake your foundation of trust for any friendship or any relationship to wonder, like, has other stuff been happening or did other stuff happen that I had no idea about? So it's interesting as you've been talking, I think about the book of Philippians where Paul's talking about kind of his brag list of like, hey, you know, I was Pharisee amongst Pharisees, born of this tribe. Like I had all this stuff going for me, but I counted garbage compared to knowing Christ of just like, you know, all these accolades. And so obviously his situation is different than yours, but you mentioned a couple times, like in the moment, you don't realize you're developing this steel resolve, but tell us what Jesus was doing inside of you during those moments where you felt utterly betrayed, where you're clicking defriend, you know, on your crew of people that you thought, you know, you'd be partying with when you're 60, or dealing with the glances from people in Target. Or tell us what Jesus was doing inside of you and some of the ways he met you or spoke to you in those moments.
I don't think I ever had a more clear communication path, I guess, connection with Jesus than I did during that season. Because where the world and some of my well-meaning friends and relatives were telling me marriage is forever, and when I had a toy that broke, we fixed it. We didn't throw it away and buy a new one. And I think that could only be spoken by someone who had not lived something like this, where I'm not given any other options.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was listening very carefully, almost in desperation, like, please, Lord. Like there were nights when I cried myself to sleep, and like I actually felt like he might, no, I knew he was holding me. Like I could feel it physically. And I just felt like I could hear in my quiet moments, which quiet moments don't come naturally for me. But I felt there were several times during that season when God was saying, like, just keep going. You're going to get through it. Like, no promise on how. I didn't see any light, but I just had to sort of wake up each day. And I felt like he was saying, like, just keep moving your feet in the dark.
Yeah.
You know, like just little by little, like, even though I was so angry at him and at her and at everyone, everyone I could think of. And I just felt like even during, in the midst of all of that, I was being pursued. I didn't know that when I decided to follow Jesus, that he was going to follow me too.
That's really powerful.
And he did. And so every time I like would take a leap of faith, you know, like the first time I didn't make a mortgage payment, I felt this peace. I was like, okay, here we are. We missed the payment and the world did not fall apart. We still live here. My kids and I are still having like kitchen dance parties.
Yep.
They are totally fully alive. They have no idea what's going on,
Right.
you know, so they were totally happy. And like there were these little times where I felt myself growing stronger, and it usually happened right after a really scary or awful decision. And I started to grow into my new shoes. And so the first Christmas that we were alone, because no one was there to put up a fight or speak into it, I decided that I was going to have a hot pink Christmas tree.
Yes.
I put pink and purple like all over the house. And we had a really humble but beautiful Christmas because they're young. They don't care what they get for Christmas, you know? And then this was the real point. This is such a weird thing, but there was one point in my experience as a single mom when I knew that we were going to be okay. And you would think that it's like when I started paying my bills again, when I got another car, I did actually manage to squirrel away enough money, like $1 at a time, to get my own car. And in the meantime, my little baby brother, who was only like 16 at the time, loaned me his car. And it was so cute. Yeah, it was so sweet. I love it so much. It's brought us so close, because I imagine when you're 16, you don't really want to give up your first car. But he did it with like such love in his heart. He loves me so much. And so I finally got a car. All these wonderful things were happening. But that's not the turning point for me in the single mom experience. It was actually the first time I mowed the lawn. And this is so dumb. They were another group that really walked me through. Anyway, eventually I told him, like, I have to do this. You don't understand. And he's like, okay, well, don't break it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't even get it started at first. And I just kept pulling and pulling. And I'm sweating in the like Florida heat. I'm sweating all over myself. And I'm crying a little bit because I'm like, I'm never even going to get the mower started. And then it starts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hear me roar. And I honestly, like, I mowed that lawn so ugly. Like, there were like weird hedges everywhere. I cut it so close in some places that the lawn died later. But I finished that yard. I was like covered in like sweat and lawn clippings. Yeah. I was like human shake and bake.
Oh
but
gosh.
I got done and I was like, we're going to make it.
I'm a woman.
Yeah. It's almost
we
like
are going to make it. Like, I can do this. I can do it all. Like, I don't need any other human being to keep us afloat.
Yeah. It's almost like the lawn mowing experience was like a metaphor for everything
I was just thinking
through.
That.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. Just like, hey, I relied on somebody else. And now it's time to actually like do the work to figure out how to get it done and go through the mess of what it looks like to do it. And it may not look pretty, but I'm still going to do it. And I'm still going to step back and say, I got it done. And
that's right.
You know, there's people who there to help me, but I got it done. It is funny how those like very physical things are just such mile markers of like, it was this one experience that really helped me to see it's going to be okay.
Wow. So we know that your faith really helped you through that time. And I'm sure there were other things like you had mentioned, like going to therapy, you know, focusing on your kids.
Having some neighbors and some other friends, family who helped you.
What really sticks out to me, though, isn't that God just kind of made it all go away for you. It was that each day giving you a little bit of hope, a little bit of strength to keep going. Mm-hmm. And it probably felt really slow, real slow, just the day to day, trusting God, hanging on, and continuing to go. So knowing you now, how has this experience changed the way that you talk about your faith and share your faith with others?
Well, I think that I knew I was a God-fearing woman, like a Christian follower. I knew Jesus was in my heart, but I feel like as a result of this experience and having to rely completely on him, I feel like I married Jesus. Like, I feel like my husband was Jesus. And he did a dang good job supporting me and giving me just what I needed to not crawl out of there. I did not crawl out of there. Like, at first it might have been crawling, and then it was climbing, and then it might have been walking, and then it was sprinting, and now it's flying. I had no idea at the time, you know, that I would ever fly again.
Yeah.
You know, and so I talk about my faith and I remind people that even the darkest and most heartbreaking, even the most hopeless situations in our life are not without hope.
Yeah.
If we have him. And when I say like, God is my hope, that's really what I mean. Like, that without him, I don't really know what would have happened to the kids or me. And I love sharing this ugly, disgusting, embarrassing part of my story because it isn't ugly or disgusting in the end. It's not, even in the midst of it, the little tiny moments where I drew closer to God, or even though I was like crying myself to sleep, I still managed to like get up and take my kids to the fall festival the next day. You just keep going because you have to.
Yeah.
People were like, I don't know how you do it. I mean, your kids are so little. Usually when you get a divorce, like, it's, you know, they're older and more self-sufficient and you have like a joint visitation schedule. And we didn't have any of that. It was just me all the time.
Wow.
And they were like, I don't know how you do it. And I was like, you know what? You just do.
Yeah.
It's not me. I'm not fantastic. Like, I am an ordinary person doing ordinary things every day. And I still made lots and lots of mistakes. Certainly he did not wipe away everything. And I had, you know, after I mowed the lawn, like, everything was perfect. And, you know, we still like went into bankruptcy a year later.
Yeah.
I was okay. Like I knew we were doing the right thing. And I think that for people who are in really terrible seasons of grief or pain or shame, it's really easy to hide those things away or to pretend like it's not as bad as it really is. I think that there is an epidemic of depression and anxiety that's kept in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to encourage people to not be so ashamed and to not squirrel it away,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to feel it to heal it.
Yeah.
You really do. And you don't even know what that looks like, and you don't get to. My faith is different. The way that I connect with other people is different. I'm not better than anyone. I'm not an alpha anything. I'm not in the in crowd. I don't even know what that is when you're in your like mid 30s.
I think it's being the PTA vice president, maybe.
Yeah, still got it. No, I'm just kidding. I don't put the same value on things like that anymore.
Yeah.
I know that that's not my worth. My worth does not have anything to do with what positions I have in the community or how many likes I get on Facebook,
Right.
or how perfect everyone thinks I am. Like, who even cares about that?
Yeah.
That is not important.
I want to jump back to something you talked about of, you have to feel it to heal it. And I think a lot of times one of the most horrific things that can happen in a Christian community when you're going through painful, devastating things is for people to tell you platitudes like God's going to work it all out, or
He won't give you more than you can handle.
Right. And Madison and I have been reading a book about different parts of our identity. And one of the things the author talks about is how we have a really weak theology of lament and grief. And I think for a lot of probably Christian women listening to this, they probably have things in their lives that they feel ashamed about, that they feel like, I don't even want to go there because it's too painful and hard. But, as you're talking today, you're talking about, I felt it. I felt the pain of being woken up all night by two young children. And yet, because I felt it, acknowledged it, cried out, I saw Jesus in a new way. So I think the scary temptation is to hide it and to be ashamed and to just speak those platitudes and end up having this anger, bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness just grow inside of you. What advice would you give to Christian women who may be afraid to go to some of those dark places and feel it, and to acknowledge like life kind of sucks and it feels like God is not here. He is not coming through in the ways that I was told he would when I was little. This is not the kind of faith I signed up for. Or even having the pain of, like you're saying, friends who you thought would be there for you betray you. What advice would you give to them as they're working through that and trying to find healing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that God knows my heart, because I only know myself. I don't know the other women or the way that their hearts are built. I think that we do have some common, I guess, misconceptions about God's role in our times of despair or grief or, recovery, because why would a God who loves me allow this?
Right.
Like, there were times in this when I was angry at him too.
Yeah.
It's just, if you turn your back on everyone, then there's nothing left. And I didn't want to be alone in it. So I think that when I say things like you have to feel it to heal it, I really mean that, like, true healing. Like, this was a one step at a time thing. Like, I had to seek wise counsel and throw away the advice or, well-meaning cliches.
Right. Kind of the bad theology, like bumper sticker theology almost.
Oh gosh. Oh, please. That's a whole new episode. But, I think that you have to know that people, when they say things like that, they don't say it out of a place of evil or a bad heart. I'm sure that I have said some really dumb things in an effort to help somebody.
Sure.
It didn't go very well, and that I probably made it worse. But really, when you're in that place and you're looking around and you're like, why? Like, why is this happening? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it's not going to make any sense. I still grieve for the injustices done.
Yeah.
But I had to get to a point where I got all the way to the inside, to my core. And I journaled, and I actually made friends that I could trust. And I did little things here and there to reestablish myself. And I did hard work in therapy and I prayed a lot. And some of those prayers, they were not like beautiful prayers. Some of them were like prayers of anger or desperation or, woe is me. I mean, I played the victim a little bit, but you have to get to the core of whatever it is. And you have to heal from the inside out. Because if you're trying to heal like one little piece of you at a time from the outside in, it's going to resurface. This is like a weed, and so you have to get to the root. You have to get to the core of yourself, and you have to heal a little bit at a time. Forgiveness was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
That set me free to not be such an angry person anymore, to love and respect myself enough to like acknowledge that this was terrible.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I'm different now, and I probably will always struggle with a moderate amount of trust issues.
Yeah.
I may always, I pray about this all the time, but like I may always struggle with certain issues because of these wounds.
Yeah.
And I think that saying that I won't anymore because I have Jesus isn't fair to myself and how far I've come. And it isn't fair to the people who are in it now.
Yeah.
And will do a lot of healing and never quite feel the same. I think that's okay. But healing from the inside out means that I get another shot. I can do this right. And I can have a totally normal new life. And then there's the birth of a new dream.
Yeah.
Emma, I have one last question for you, for our listeners, and for myself, actually. So a lot of the struggles that you have faced are kind of like taboo struggles in the church, like divorce, being a single mom. And I think that some of those cliche phrases come out because people don't know how to deal with that.
And it feels uncomfortable.
And so for our listeners who have friends who are going through those same things, what advice would you have for them? Because personally for me, I actually have a friend who is getting ready to go through divorce and become a single mom herself. And I haven't been through that. I don't know what that's like. So I need help too, figuring out how to minister to her and how to share my faith with her in a way that's going to meet her where she is. So what advice do you have for me and for our listeners who have friends going through the same thing you went through?
I think that a lot of my well-meaning friends inadvertently put up a little wall between us when they would give me advice about being a single mom, or the end is near, everything's going to be fine. Like, you don't know that. You have never done this. That's what I'm thinking in my head. I'm saying, thank you so much. You're so sweet. Like, feel free to bring dinner any day, like that's fine. But what I really loved, I loved meeting other single moms or remarried moms who had done this and felt good about it, and they could like affirm me and say the things and actually know what they're talking about. But if you don't know what your friend is going through or how they're coping with it, and we won't all cope the same, I think if you want to stay in that person's life, then you just remind them that they're not alone.
Yeah.
If you could take it away, you would. And that if there are things that you can do, sometimes in the grief, you don't know how to ask for what you really want. So then I think it's important to just stick with it, even when they push you away.
To say, no, I am bringing lasagna tonight.
And if they say, no, 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 I mean, you can still find small ways to say, I don't care what you do to me. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like the friend who was the most obnoxious and who pursued me the hardest is actually the one that I credit with making me feel like I was going to be fine, like that she wasn't going to leave no matter what terrible things I did or said in my grief, because we're not ourselves.
Yeah.
But to know that they're not quitting on me and that they still see in me something wonderful, and that it's okay if I feel like crap today. It's okay. That they still love me and that I'm not alone. And I think that we can do that for our friends, even when we don't know what specifically to say. Please don't make something up or spout off some cliches or bad theology, because I think we have to admit that we don't know what we're talking about. And I liked that when people were like, yeah, wow, if this happened to me, that would be so awful. That would be like my worst nightmare. And I had a friend say that, and I was like actually comforted. I was like, you know what? This is my worst nightmare. Thank you so much for acknowledging that.
I know. Sometimes I think just validating what people are going through. I had a friend do that to me recently when I was really upset and stressed about some things. And she was like, Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot you're dealing with. And it felt like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like these things really are legitimately difficult. We talk a lot about like just seeing people and acknowledging where they're at and just validating their pain of just, I see you, I'm with you. That's hard. And sometimes that can be the most powerful thing we do for friends or people in our lives.
Absolutely. And I think you can speak truth into people's lives when you see them like spiraling out of control without trying to control them. You know what I mean? I think you can run alongside people sometimes and accept that this is just how they're going to get through it.
Yeah.
My mom said something, I think when I started dating again, she was like, well, whatever it is that you need to do or say or be or have to get through this season, that's okay with me.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, like it made me feel not so bad because, I coped right most of the time, but I coped wrong a few times too.
Yeah.
This is like a learning experience. We learn as we go, it's like parenting.
Yep.
So we fail forward. I mean, that was a hopeful thing, just being validated, just telling, because I know the truth. I know what I need to be doing. I'm just not prepared to do it yet.
Well, thank you, Emma, so much for sharing your story on our podcast today. It's been great just hearing how God has been at work in your life. And if you are a listener and you've been through some stuff and maybe you've done the healing work and you want to share your story, Stonecroft has some great resources to help you figure out how to do that. One is called The Story of Now, discovering what Jesus is doing in your life and how you can communicate that with others. And the other one is called Your Story, all about looking at your life and seeing where Jesus has made a difference and how he is continuing to make a difference. So thank you for listening today. And Emma, thank you again for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you for listening to Ears to Speak today, a podcast sponsored by Stonecroft Ministries. If you liked what you heard, please go right now and subscribe.
Do it. Just subscribe it. Also, if you have feedback, questions, comments, suggestions for what you want to hear in the future, check out our Facebook page, Ears to Speak, or shoot Madison or myself an email at connections@stonecroft.org. We hope today that you were inspired to listen, learn, and love people better.